I'm Sasha Nicole.
And I'm Star.
And I'm Dr. T.
And this is Amerikan Therapy, the definitive podcast for all things Black mental health. And we are super, super excited today. This is a big and a first for us. Star.
Woo, 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 woo. From the Arsenio holidays. So perfectly timely topic, criminalization of Black girls, and how do we protect our Black girls and our Black women in our community?
Right. And so we have a very, very special guest. If you all don't know, we have Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. She just got off the House floor. So I'm going to quickly read her bio just so you all know. Congresswoman Clarke is hailing from Central Brooklyn. She feels honored to represent the community that raised her. She's a proud daughter of Jamaican immigrants and takes her passion for her Caribbean heritage to Congress, where she co-chairs the Congressional Caribbean Caucus and works to foster relationships between the United States and the Caribbean community. She's the vice chair of Powerful Energy and Commerce Committee and a member of the Homeland Security Committee. And Clarke has been a member of the Congressional Black Caucus since coming to Congress in 2007, and today chairs its Immigration Task Force while acting as an active member of its Census 2020 Task Force. I did do my census, y'all. I just want you to know.
Me too. We got out. You know.
She's the representative of the 9th Congressional District of New York. Congresswoman Clarke has dedicated herself to continuing the legacy of excellence established by the late Honorable Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman and Caribbean American elected to Congress. In the 116th Congress, Congresswoman Clarke introduced landmark legislation which passed in the House, the Dream and Promise Act, H.R. 6. This legislation would give 2.5 million Dreamers temporary protected status and deferred enforcement departure recipients a clear pathway to citizenship. She's a leader in the tech and media policy space as a co-chair of Smart Cities Caucus. And prior to being elected to the United States House of Representatives, Congresswoman Clarke served on the New York City's Council representing the 40th District. She succeeded her pioneering mother, which is a huge landmark.
Good Lord.
Former City Council member Dr. Una S.T. Clarke, making them the first mother-daughter succession in the history of the City Council. So, Congresswoman Clarke, we are so super excited to have you.
You forgot something, Sasha.
Oh, yes, Dr. T, throw it up.
No. You forgot that she's also gonna be my mentor. You know.
Oh, but Dr. T, you can still throw it up because y'all are stores.
I'm gonna put that kitty. I'm gonna throw that kitty out.
Yeah, you know we're famous.
Finally, I'm not outnumbered on the show.
Hey, I know, right? We're really excited because there's so many women right now, especially Black women, who feel like their voices are being unheard on a variety of different topics. And one thing that we've noticed that you have done and continue to do is try to be a champion, not only just for Black women, but for the Black community and communities in general. Because I know that, you know, Brooklyn and the U.S. in general is so broad than just to say our Black communities, but you have made it a point to try to champion our Black communities and the needs that we have. One of those things was the Congressional Caucus for Black Women and Girls, which leads us to this conversation today that talks about how we have staggering numbers with our girls and our women in our communities who are being criminalized. And so we wanted to just talk to you today about that and just about any other legislation and things that you're working on that can continue to champion our communities to a better place. Because obviously right now, COVID, the protests, this is a unique time. So
it absolutely is. And let me thank you ladies for having me, and having this conversation this evening is quite timely and it's important because again, I think one of the things that we try to do through the Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Girls is lift up the unique, authentic experiences of Black women and girls in society, and the ways in which, one, we have been marginalized, two, we are not given the support and the wherewithal to really reach levels of excellence that we are capable of, that we exemplify each and every day, and the ways in which we have been vilified throughout history, yet still we rise, notwithstanding all that has been done to hold us back, to keep us back, starting from when we are little girls growing up in our communities. And excuse me a moment.
It happens to us all the time.
Okay.
We be like, ah.
And now I'm back. I'm just really proud to serve in the House of Representatives and to co-chair the Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Girls with two other women, Congresswoman Robin Kelly of Illinois and Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman of New Jersey. We knew that it was critical that we established in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill a caucus on Black women and girls. As we began to see our numbers grow in the House of Representatives, we knew that we could really bring to the fore the experiences as well as the policy to impact Black women and girls in ways in which we think will resonate across this nation, because our experiences are unique, and particularly in this period of time where we're dealing with racial injustice. We have been in the forefront of the liberation of our people for generations, time immemorial, but oftentimes don't get the recognition, though that's not what we're seeking. But it you know, being in a chauvinist society, Black males tend to get the praise, though we tend to do the work. And that's the important thing. We're talking about recognition of the work that we put in. And that work is critical because it is transformative in a society like ours. You know, you have Sojourner Truth stand up at a convention and say, "Ain't I a woman?" And that was because she was in the room doing the work. She had raised her children. She had come out of bondage. She was a part of the suffrage movement, but was not given any recognition for her space and her place. Fannie Lou Hamer, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, organizing for Black people in the Mississippi Freedom Movement. You know, and today we see the fruits of her labor, where the Confederate symbol is being taken off of the Mississippi state flag. You know, they're not going to attribute that to the fact that there was this woman who that through her struggle, through her risking her life, lifted up the voices of Black people in a way in which no other could have done so. And so I think it's quite appropriate today that we have this conversation. I can talk about legislation passed in the House today that zeroed in on maternal health, where we recognize that Black women die far more frequently in childbirth than any other women cohort of women in the United States of America. And we had to pass legislation to address this disparity. And when we talk about healthcare disparities, we talk about the fact that Black women are oftentimes diagnosed far later in the stages of breast cancer than any other cohort of women who are diagnosed with breast cancer, thus making our chances of survival a lot less than other women in society. And a lot of it is that we're not trusted to be able to speak with the medical environment, with the medical professionals, and are taken seriously about what we experience. So the fight for recognition, the fight for just being trusted in our own life experience has been a battle throughout our history in the United States. So, you know, we know that Black women and girls face a unique double whammy of having to experience both racism and sexism that have created these disparities throughout our lives. So I'm going to stop there because I know we got a lot of questions, because I could talk about this as you all you sisters could as well. But I really want to get into what conversations we like to delve into this evening.
So Representative Clarke, today was historic. So I'm a maternal and mental health advocate. I'm a March of Dimes fellow. So today was historic. Like I was watching, I was like, did it pass? Did it pass? But how, I have my niece here because I was like, I want her to see this. She's a rising sophomore at University of West Virginia. She has her own question, but I guess for the tone of just before we really get into it, like how is this time in the movement gonna be different, and how can we make sure Black women's voices are elevated in this next great step in the movement? I went to this year's State of the Union as a guest of Leader Hoyer, and I literally was brought to tears when I saw in the dais and saw all of y'all. I was like, oh, we got some numbers going, but not enough for my comfort. But it did feel like, oh shoot, Black girl magic, okay, with all the white on and all that. I was taking it back, but I want to make sure for her that her voice is heard. People don't dismiss her when she's hurt or needs something like that. And how do I do that? How do we make legislation, policy that ensures that she's going to be on equal footing? She's not going to have to do the fight I've done.
Well, there are no guarantees. And the one thing that we can say is that we have always made our presence known wherever we are, in whatever spaces we occupy, by speaking out, by being vocal, by being true to our experiences in those spaces and making it known how we feel and what we like, what we desire in those spaces. So whether it's in the classroom or it's in the boardroom, it's critical that Black women continue to be their authentic selves and that we add value to every conversation, because indeed groupthink will eliminate us from those spaces. But when we come to the conversation with our unique experiences, when we come to the conversation challenging the status quo, we already changed the chemistry of the body and the space that we're in. And you know what's so unique about the Black women that you see in the United States House of Representatives? For so many years, the Black women of Congress were elected primarily from majority minority districts. But now we're seeing so many Black women coming from majority districts that, that tells you that Black women's experiences, their voices are being accepted across the board. We have been very vocal. You can look at Congresswoman Lucy McBath from Georgia. You can look at Congresswoman Val Demings from Orlando, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty from Ohio, Congresswoman Lauren Underwood from Illinois. These are all women who serve in districts that are not majority Black districts, and their voices were able to raise up people of every background and experience. And it's because we face insurmountable odds in the lives that we lead. And when we are successful, it is like a magnet. It draws people unto us, because if we can speak our truth, it resonates. And it's reflective of the experiences of many others who don't have the ability to speak. And it also enables those who have been struggling in society with systemic racism to confront it in a way in which they haven't before. I think about the Black Lives Matter movement, and as quiet as it's kept, we know that it was sisters who started that movement. The movement to say her name, the movement about addressing those who have been sexually assaulted. All of these movements were started by Black women. And so we are in the space, we are doing this work, and it's just important for your niece to know that her voice is just as valued in any space that she finds herself in, as long as she's speaking to her authentic self and brings to it her life experience, intellect, and abilities.
Congresswoman Clarke, can you talk about you have been representing legislation for a long time now. Can you talk about what it has been like for you as a Black woman when there weren't hardly any other peers of yours, any other Black women that you could look to? You definitely had, I'm sure, a pioneer within your mother, within the council, but as you went to Congress, what has it been like for you in that position of power and maintaining your own mental health?
Well, I have been very fortunate to be rooted in a positive self-image. Growing up in Brooklyn, New York, I was born just after sort of the civil rights movement. So I was a beneficiary of the civil rights movement. And in New York, we had the Black Power movement. We had Black is Beautiful. And so growing up in that space where, it was not impossible for us to see Black women in leadership positions, whether it was the Block Association or the PTA, whether it was an elective office like the Honorable Shirley Chisholm was my congresswoman, had numerous state legislators. These were all role models. And so it just never dawned on me that Black women could not be in leadership positions. Coming to Congress, there weren't quite as many Black women in office as there are today, but there were numerous Black women seated in the House of Representatives when I arrived. I was the only Black woman elected in my class, the class of 2007, but I was embraced quickly by women like Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones, Congresswoman Melinda McDonald, Congresswoman Julia Carson, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Barbara Lee. I mean, I can go down the list because a number of those women are still serving with me today. And they just sort of circled me, embraced me, sort of showed me the ropes, offered to mentor me and assisted me in getting into leadership positions, particularly in the Congressional Black Caucus. Congresswoman Carolyn Kilpatrick, all of these sisters knew that it was important because I am the only Black woman in the New York State congressional delegation to be able to lift me up, and we lift one another up on the issues that are critical, that impact our communities, the people we represent, and by extension, women across this nation.
Dr. T,
mentorship is a very important part of that.
Dr. T, can you speak on, as Congresswoman Clarke stated, the need for us to continue to elevate our voices and how, sometimes when feeling stifled, the impacts that they may have and, some tools that you would give and us being able to mentally prepare ourselves to continue to do that?
Well, as the Congresswoman said, it is very difficult to be a Black woman in this country. When we think about how we're portrayed in the media and historically, we are strong. We are, we carry everything on our backs. We take care of everything else, and we are selfless. And so we have adopted that as our own persona, which then when we go and ask for help, nobody takes us seriously, and we don't push because we haven't been taught to push and to stand up for ourselves. We'll stand up for all these other things. And so, as the Congresswoman said, we end up having disproportionate healthcare issues, economic issues, all across the board. I think a large part of that is the way that we're portrayed, and we have accepted that self-perception amongst ourselves. So the first thing we have to do is allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and we have to be willing to push back. And the issues around healthcare disparity is so important, as the Congresswoman said, to remember that these are not socioeconomic issues. A Black woman who is wealthy and a Black woman who is poor has the same poor health outcomes. So that tells you there's something about being a Black woman that is detrimental in this country. And we have to stand up for ourselves first and be willing to push back, because we can't expect everyone else to take on our issues willingly, right? That has never been our case. That has never been our story. So first there's the awareness, and I love what the caucus is doing and passing the legislation. We have to stand up and we have to get credit for the things that we've done. And then we have to demand the things that we need. And that starts with our own self-care, taking care of ourselves. We are really good at taking care of our significant other, taking care of our children, taking care of our parents, taking care of our community. But we really, really are terrible at taking care of ourselves. And so we need to lead by example and start taking care of ourselves, start speaking up for ourselves, our own health care, and not accept less than, because we wouldn't accept that for someone else. If we were speaking for our sister or our brother or our children, we would not accept that. And we have to be willing to do that same thing for ourselves.
And it's important to, Dr. Tanya, that we teach our girls the very things that we're talking about, because it's about behavior modification, and that we shape our own narrative so that others aren't telling our story, because our story has been so distorted that we are oftentimes afraid to tell our story or afraid to speak out, because we feed into the stereotypes that others have hoisted upon us. So that when we are being sort of outspoken, we become that angry Black person, that angry Black woman, right? When we challenge what an assumption that someone has about us, whether it's in the medical office or someplace else, then we become sort of that aggressor as opposed to someone looking out for our own interests. We have to sort of deprogram our own mindsets so that we can create a healthy space just within our own minds for to be passed along to our girls. I think about the fact that Black girls are oftentimes disciplined and suspended in school and held in detention for similar actions that their white female counterparts display in the classroom. But for some reason, we're seen as being more aggressive or more harmful to others. And so we have to stand up and we have to speak out at every turn to make sure that we're not, that we will not accept the stigmas that are placed on us, because that's the only way we turn the dialogue around. That's the only way that the respect that we require and demand is given to us.
Yeah, and I would say don't forget the over-sexualization of Black girls.
Absolutely.
Schools, and that's been the big movement around changing dress codes, where many dress codes across the country are specifically targeted at sexualizing the bodies of young Black girls and what they wear, and not their white counterparts. And so that is another equally important, that we can be proud and comfortable of who we are, what we look like, and we don't have to be subjugated to other people's interpretation of that.
That happens even in the professional workplace. You know, I've seen where they've sent out memos where oftentimes targeting Black women where they can't have a dress that's shorter, but then I've seen white colleagues who will literally, if you just breathe wrong, the dress is all the way at the butt. And there's never, you know, an issue made with that. And so we just see these, you know, varying differences that occur in so many aspects. Star, what was you going to say?
Well, I mean, like, you know, thinking about Black women, I think about even the difference, even in this moment of like Black Lives Matter, we still have our sister Breonna Taylor, and, you know, all these lives matter, but it seems like our sisters are taking even a back seat in this critical moment. You know, her killers have still not been arrested. They make a law with her name on it and they fire the police officers, but yet there's no charges filed. So how can we, even in this critical moment, how can we leverage policy at a federal and a state and local level so that those types of things cannot continue to happen, or this country is not going to stand?
Exactly. Well, you know, we did pass a sweeping policing reform suite of legislation just last week. And within that, we make illegal the no-knock warrant, which was what responsible for Breonna's death. Well, the officers used that as, in order to enter her home. And so, it's after the fact. But I think it's important that, when we look at these cases, that our sisters who are in the legal field step up and speak out. That we have a lot of sisters who are lawyers, who are law enforcement, and we need to make sure that they're organized, they coalesce, that they are a part of speaking out on these matters, because, we have to put a face to the struggle, and we have to put a face to the remedy. And to the extent that we can use our bar associations, our our noble organizations, all of the organizations that we have, to be prepared in the event that there are circumstances like this, to stand up, hold their press conferences, lead these marches, come and testify before Congress, testify before state legislatures. That's where we need to be in terms of organizing. And what has happened is we will start a movement, but life circumstances, we can't sustain a movement. Our allies end up taking over a movement when we need to be in it for the long haul. So one of the things that I've been calling for during this time of civil unrest is for us to recalibrate ourselves, organize ourselves, be prepared. We have the talent, we have the skill, we have the expertise, we have the organization. Those organizations need to be mobilized so that it is evident wherever you go that Black women can manage these situations, that Black women can go and be a defense attorney, can be an attorney for that family, can be in that courtroom where the case is coming up, or where Black law enforcement. Can you imagine if all of the Black women who were police chiefs right now stood up and said, we want to see those officers brought up on charges, how powerful that would be?
It would be powerful, but one of the things that, from a policy and just, as an advocate space, we've seen, they want to stand up, but they often are not, or do not feel they are empowered to stand up. We just did a show with Noble, and they care. They're Black too. They have Black children, but I don't know how much leeway they have to stand up, because many of those people are also members of the FOP, the one of the, if not the most powerful union in this country right now, and with the backing of the full backing of the White House. I don't know how much they can stand up. I have a cousin who's done our show, and she wanted to speak, but it's like, hey, there's two sides to, I have to protect myself. And one of the things that they pushed for us was that, we want people to focus on local and state as far as policy changes. But we pushed back on the show and said, well, not all, but the majority of the significant policing protections are federally mandated. The law enforcement, officer Bill of Rights, the qualified immunity, so it's like you're protected federally, but you want people to advocate local.
Well, I get their point, because nothing changes at the national level, significant transformative change, unless you get the stirring on the ground. And we move quickly in the House of Representatives and in the Senate because people were in the streets. Mm-hmm. And people have not left the streets. And what you're seeing is that across this nation, local police departments, state legislatures, all of them are like in lightning speed changing policies, because they see that the temperature has not been able to turn down. And I think that it is important for us, while we're asking our law enforcement and our legal community to stand up, that we continue to stand. Because the moment that we feel relaxed and that we've made it, that's the moment that the status quo, which is very stubborn, will try to creep its way back in. This is a moment of the generations. And to the extent that we are standing in the streets and we are backing our Black law enforcement, we are backing and we are watching and we are making sure that we are speaking on their behalf, the more that they have the latitude to do what needs to be done. I'm seeing changes in New York City's police department in very short order, and we have one of the most intractable police unions in the nation. This is a police union that actually turned its back on the mayor of the city of New York. And I said to our mayor, listen, we got your back if you do right by us. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. You better be damned if you do, because your legacy is tied to what you will do in this moment to transform the New York City Police Department. He understood that. He seized the moment. New Yorkers have remained in the street, and they will stay there until the deed is done. And these unions are recognizing that their days are numbered as well, because as we see, more and more departments are becoming more and more diverse. And when I hear colleagues on the Hill talk about the fact that, people aren't going to want these jobs, I'm like, no, bad people aren't going to want these jobs. Good people will want these jobs. And so I want to encourage Black women in these spaces, in these unique male-dominated spaces, to know that they are supported. This is a time of courage. This is a time where we can't be fearful of our jobs, of our lives, because our lives are already at stake. And, they will either, as they say, we'll either hang together or we'll hang separately. Right now is the time for us to hang together.
Congresswoman Clarke, we want to thank you very much for coming on. We're just going to go ahead and close out. Stars, did you have one more question? And then we're going to close it out.
Hi, Ms. Congresswoman Clarke. I'm LaShawna Barber, I'm her niece. I went to West Virginia University, and I had a question. So what advice would you give young Black girls in this time of the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as fighting for our spot in education? I know personally that I have to fight twice as hard as anybody else just to get my help or any aid in school. So what advice would you give any young Black girl just to keep fighting, and what should we do when we come upon any situations that really discourage us from continuing to move on?
I would say organize, because you're not in this by yourself. If it's just one other sister on that campus with you, you two hang together. If it's two others, get everyone together, and then determine who your allies are and organize. That may be some Latino sisters, that may be some Native American sisters. Believe me, you're not in it by yourself, and oftentimes we isolate ourselves. When we come together, when we put our demands on the table, your allies you're gonna see who your allies are, and they're gonna automatically be drawn to you. Start there. That demonstrates leadership. It demands respect, and it accomplishes your goals. You will not be marginalized in those spaces because you took it upon yourself to be courageous in that space and to say that my education is paramount. Our education is paramount. And until you do right by us, there ain't nothing going. No, I'm just joking.
Dr. T, what say you?
This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Clarke. I am going to go back, ladies, to where I've been the past couple of weeks, because as the Congresswoman talked about Black women leadership, I remember it brought to mind a conversation I had with some Black women leaders who are in the sunset of their careers. And they talked about how they were able to persevere because they knew the village had their back. And so,
Right.
Congresswoman, I have been talking about for the last few shows, the social fabric in the Black community is ripped. And I think that we as Black women are gonna have to put some effort into repairing that social fabric because it held us up. You know, if I'm gonna be out there fighting, I need to know that you're watching my kids and you're making sure their homework is done and that they're gonna have a hot meal, because we're all caring about each other. We're all watching out for each other and our children and our homes and our families. If Black women have to split their attention, that's why they're backing down off the front, because that social fabric is no longer holding us up. And so I want to encourage us in this moment as Black women to think about what we can do to support each other. And so that whoever is going to rise up in leadership, we just want it done. And we know that a Black woman is going to get it done, but we also know that she needs a Black woman to have her back so that she can get it done. And so,
and like I have said, you know, I remember just the early organizing with my mom, and they didn't have childcare.
right.
What they would do is everyone would bring their kids to the meeting.
Mhm.
Those kids would stay in a particular space in the room, and every now and then a parent would come by to make sure if we needed anything, we had it, that our homework was being done, and they would just circulate that way while they were organizing. That's how I learned to organize, because I was in the room being nosy, listening and seeing what they were doing. We have to expose our children to those healthy environments where we are speaking about our truths, where we are strategizing and putting plans together, because they're going to learn from that. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about in terms of that knitting together the social fabric. I believe in it. It's time for us to get back to that. We're all pretty much beneficiaries of that, but because we were beneficiaries, we did not necessarily learn all of the tools that got us to where we are right now. And we need to sort of reconnect with it. So Dr. Tanya, I'm with you 100%.
Star, what's your two things? Because
All right,
Star
I got
always
two
has
things.
2 things.
So one, you know, thank you, gratitude, appreciation. But my 2 things for today are going to be, the first one is take up the mantle. We talk about organizing. I think one of the things a lot of people are fearful of is that I don't have enough power, capital, whatever to do. I don't have enough people, but it's like one person can change the trajectory of the entire world, starting a whole movement based on like a chicken dinner. We're gonna all have a chicken dinner. We're gonna talk about X, Y, and Z, and we're gonna have a goal of, you know, raising X dollars to do Y. You know, that's organizing. And so I think we've got to go back to taking up the mantle as Black people and understanding, like, we're in this age of everything is big and grand, but it doesn't always have to be big and grand. And I think for our mental health, it's imperative that we take up that mantle, because when we're sitting in stasis and we're not moving, we're not doing anything, and all this shit is happening to us, that's what makes you go crazy. You know, you feel like the world is at you and you can't do nothing about it. So organize, take up the mantle. No matter how small it may seem, you don't know where it's going to go. And then my second and last thing is courage. Congresswoman Clarke, you talked about this is a time for courage. And I strongly believe in that. I believe that, you know, this is a time where we got to speak uncomfortable truths, and we got to consistently speak uncomfortable truths. We got to make some people squirm in that seat or get up if it's not the right seat for them. You know, this is not the time to placate, not the time to, you know, we don't want to hurt people or be rude, but this is the time to speak the truth, because if we let it go, it'll never come back. we'll be imprisoned in all these lies that we've built around ourselves anyway. So courage, because I'm not going to have her go through what I've gone through. And yeah, I look pretty and kept together. You know, I've done it pretty with some heels on, but it still hurt. And it's still, you know, it's trauma. It's real trauma. And we can't have them carry that forward.
Absolutely. I think I just close out and say, just to remind people why this show is important, is because while we know that there has been a focus on Black men, there has definitely been a shift and increasingly focus on Black women. And so it's imperative for us to understand that Black people in general, we need each other. A statistic, Black women and girls represent 30% of all women incarcerated, but make up just 13% of the population. That's a huge, you know, if you do the math on that, that is an incredible number, and it continues to just grow every day. And so we need to be diligent about representing our communities. You know, we have so many things going on, and it's, you know, right now it's the time to focus on making sure our lives are represented. And then we need to come back, and we need to come back to our community and start working on the issues that we are, you know, facing against. And so it's just important that we look at these numbers, that we try to change these numbers, and that we show up for each other, and show up for not only just our brothers, but show up for our Black sisters, because we do need you, and we need our allies as well to show up for us too, and not be complacent in the things that they see that are happening, and be uncomfortable with us, because this is real. And what is happening right now is, like Congresswoman Clarke said, this is a new generation, a new time. So we appreciate you. We honor you. Thank you so much for being on, and namaste, as Star would say. And we
Thank you for having me, ladies, and thank you for presenting this to our community. It's very, very critical that we continue to have these conversations. Much success with the podcast. I know that you all are going to draw a number of folk to these conversations, and from that comes the organizing that we've been talking about. God bless.
Absolutely.